we are.
Told you to walk away. That was my first and last mistake. I'm blue without your face. But what can I do? 'Cause I'm just a sinking ship, and you're just a pair of lips that I've lost in the moment. All I want is for you to come back. Now I'm caught in the middle of life, and I need.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host, Rashid, and I'd like to thank my friend and colleague for coming back on the platform again. Welcome, Larry Johnson, former CIA analyst.
Yeah, I will tell them about the threats you made that if I didn't show up. So I'm here. Okay. All right. There were no threats. All right.
Larry, you've just returned from Russia. Tell us the feeling on the ground. Tell us what they were talking to you about, and tell us what they think of the so-called offers coming from the West.
They look at the United States like, what in the hell is going on? What's wrong with you? I mean, it's just, I've used the analogy frequently, but I think it's accurate. It's like Russia feels like it's been in the relationship, in a romantic relationship with a crazy person, and they realize it's a toxic relationship. Then they'd say, man, yeah, you're beautiful, and the times you're charming, but good God, you are dangerous. You're vicious. You're violent. And so, you know what? We're going to go forge new relationships with someone else. And that's why you see Russia and China, the relationship between those two are getting, stronger and stronger with each passing day. There is a fundamental misunderstanding in the United States about Russia. And it became apparent, I forget what I was reading, but it was Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, talking about the sanctions. And he really believes, he's not a stupid guy, but he genuinely has convinced himself that Russia's economy is so fragile and so weak that all we got to do is put a little more pressure. It's like one of those Jenga towers. Just pull out one more little piece and it's going to collapse. It's not. It is not going to happen. Russia is too big to fail. And normally that's used in the context of U.S. financial institutions that, if they fail, by God, our society is going to collapse. But no, I mean, Russia really is, it's big. It covers 11 time zones. It's got every natural resource you could think of. You could build a wall around it, and it would have all the food it would need. It would have all the technology it would need. Now it recognizes there are benefits that come from international trade, but it is not dependent upon that. It doesn't say, oh my God, if we don't export X amount of oil this month, we're not going to have any bacon for breakfast. No. I did get to become acquainted with, spend some time with Sergei Karaganov. Mr. Karaganov, if you watched any of the proceedings at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum back in June of 2024, the closing session was a one-on-one with President Putin. Well, that was Sergei Karaganov that was hosting that and talking to Putin, and so he's got access. We're talking, someone who is considered influential within Russian society and Russian political spheres. And he's been a big advocate for several years now that, hey, go east. Our future, Russia's future is in the east. It's not in the west. It's not with Europe. The east, the Chinese, Asia, it has everything that will help us grow and expand as a country. The west, they're dead. They're an old, dying, corrupt outfit. Right now they use money to try to control people, and you know what? We're going to go east and open up new relationships. And that, the other thing I guess I came away with is the Russian people have a fundamentally different way of looking at the world. The U.S. Has this, I call it Hollywood agent mentality. I've told you that joke before about the two Hollywood agents sitting in Beverly Hills, and they're watching this beautiful starlet walk by. The one says to the other, "Man, I want to screw her," and the other agent says, "Out of what?" So it's a mentality of how can I take advantage of you? How can I take from you? How can I get up on you? How can I, win? A zero-sum game. I win, you lose. The Russians have a completely different mentality, and we saw it manifest actually in the Second Chechen War. So in 1999, there had so early in the 90s in Chechnya, there had been an uprising by radical Muslims from outside the country primarily that came in, tried to start, they started a civil war, but it got quelled or calmed down that first go round. But a few years later, in 1999, it got launched full force. Now there is the Russians believe, and I tend to agree with them, that the CIA money and assets were used to encourage recruited people, basically, that had the CIA had worked with in Afghanistan during the 1980s, fighting the Soviets, and basically unleashed them into Chechnya. Now, there were Muslims in Chechnya that fought back against these radical Sunni Islamists. And one of those was a fellow named Abdi Aladinov, General Aladinov. He wasn't a general at the time, but he told me about members of his family were killed, and that war went on for 10, 11 years. We were behind it. The United States was behind it, and the goal was to try to weaken Russia. I mean, that's our long-term objective. We can destroy Russia. We don't want to live with Russia as a full partner. We don't want to have Russia as a successful friend. No. We want to tear it apart, consume it, eat it for ourselves. It's like a demonic force. And but what did Russia do out of that? Instead of punishing the people, they rebuilt Chechnya. Today, I think the Chechnya hosts the largest mosque in the world. Incredibly beautiful. I've only seen pictures, but General Aladinov has promised that when I come, because I've been invited to visit Chechnya, and he's going to say, I'm going to make sure you're going to learn what a beautiful place we have. So what happened was, instead of having, after this vicious 10, 11-year war between really Christian Russia and this Islamic sect, there's not the anger and conflict between Christians and Muslims. Just the opposite. The Russians have found a way to live with religious and ethnic differences because they got 140 different ethnic groups and languages just across this vast expanse, 11 time zones. So they came out of that, and instead of punishing, they found a way to heal, and that healing, man, it's for real. Like I said, I spent a lot of time with General Aladinov and some of his soldiers. And again, we're talking, here's Russia. We got, you swing a dead cat, you're going to hit 10 Orthodox Christian churches. Okay. I mean, they are everywhere. But even though Orthodox Christianity is the dominant religion, still Islam flourishes. There's another city, Kazan, that in my next trip I'm going to be visiting with the political leadership there, who are all Muslims. They're not the Orthodox Christians. So I guess what I'm saying out of this is Russia's found a way that really, let's go back to Ronald Reagan's City on a Hill. If you're looking for a city that exemplifies how you would want to live, I think Russia's showing that right now. They've got something to teach us here in the United States, but unfortunately, we're so damn arrogant. We know everything. You can't tell us anything. We got the answer. We're the best. and meanwhile, what is that? 80% of the kids in the Baltimore school system, the inner city, can't read and do math at grade level. We're proud of that. And most of these are black kids. So yeah, we're sentencing them to a life of actual slavery because they can't, they don't have the reading and math skills to dominate and succeed in the world. And it just, it's really sad. Whereas in Russia, man, they make sure everybody knows how to read and write. Yes, come to think of it, so do the Chinese. Chinese and Russians are all like almost 99% literacy. Here in the United States, we're now at 79%. Really? And they say, again, I'm going with the research that I've seen online. Now, they could be false, but it said that 50% of those that read or are literate are only reading at the 6th grade level. Now, that's a couple of steps above Dick and Jane and Spot, but it's certainly not. You're not reading any Tolstoy or Dostoevsky or Mark Twain at 6th grade, or Ernest Hemingway, or we go down a list of important authors. So. I came the visits to Russia are for me are just really enlightening, and I did get the interview a guy named Vyacheslav Fetisov. Yeah, are you a hockey fan?
Sometimes.
Yeah,
I like it live. I like it live.
Well, yeah. So and I haven't followed hockey religiously, but this guy is a big deal. He is to hockey what Michael Jordan is to basketball. Okay. This is the guy who was a world champion, played on world championship teams multiple times, came to the United States in '89, basically. Let's see. So he's 3 years younger than me, 58. So he was 31 when he came to the United States. Now, within the hockey world, once you get into your 30s, you're an old man.
Yeah.
Your body's taking a beating. Initially played 2 years for the New Jersey Devils. Then went to Detroit with the Red Wings. And they brought in four other former Soviet players, younger guys though. And they won 2 straight Stanley Cups. And so here's Fetisov, who lived in the United States. He was when he got done with playing hockey in the United States, and I don't remember if he had a coaching stint, as a player coach, but he goes back to Russia, and Putin says, "Hey, I want you to become sports minister." Fetisov says, okay. Now, Fetisov played on the 1980 Soviet team that lost to the American team, the Miracle in Lake Placid. And one of the things he told me about that, he says, when we stayed in our Olympic village, they put us in a prison. He says it was he said my room that I slept in was a literal prison cell. Sliding doors with bars on it and everything. And you're thinking, what? God, we were a bunch of low-class assholes to do that, because he was in charge. He was the organizer for the Sochi Olympics in 2014. He didn't put our people in prison. No, they stayed in good accommodations. So I bring him up today because his daughter lives in the United States. I think she's an American citizen, and a grandchild, at least I think it's a granddaughter. Could be mistaken on that, but he's banned from the United States. He's a sanctioned person. Why? Because he's part of the Russian government. This guy speaks English. In fact, it was when we started the interview, we were supposed to do it in Russian because it was being recorded by TASS and they wanted the Russian people to hear it. But we start off and I said, hey, welcome. And he starts talking back to me in English and then breaks up laughing because, oh, sorry, I forgot. Oh, I'll switch to Russian. But I told him at the end, I said, no disrespect to Sergei Lavrov and the other colleagues at the foreign ministry, Ambassador Nebenzia, Ambassador Polyansky, Ambassador Rybkov. But I said, they got great skilled diplomats, but you, Mr. Fetisov, you'd be an ideal ambassador for Russia to the United States. When he became sports minister, one of his top priorities was he built over 300 hockey rinks. I mean, he didn't go out and build them himself, but he made sure they got hockey rinks throughout the country so kids could have an opportunity that he didn't have growing up. I mean, he had to go old school, get out on the frozen pond, and parents had to make great sacrifices to buy skates and sticks and the pads. But he made a point of opening it up to kids. And again, it's not restricted to only one ethnic group. It was across Russia. So there's just, at the heart of it, what I saw was just a very, very generous spirit among the Russian people. And we ought to be friends with them, man. We don't need this conflict. We don't need to treat him as an adversary. And just the hatred I constantly hear spun and spewed forth here in the United States towards Russia. It's crazy.
Isn't it because it's ingrained into the mind of the elite to be against Russia because when you think you're exceptional, you have to suppress everybody else to keep that state of mind going. Is that one of the reasons why they're always pushing against Russia? Because Russia, when it comes to military power globally, I'm talking about nuclear power, America sees Russia as the only nation really that can challenge her militarily. Well, now China, but Russia mostly.
Yeah, look, the reality is Russia's already, they've surpassed us. It is, they've got an advantage with every class of weapons that exist. They've got 4 or 5 different hypersonic missiles. And I know an individual who is one of the project leaders in the U.S., a U.S. contractor with respect to developing hypersonic missile technology. God, he is arrogant. I mean, he's a nice guy, but he's constantly just, those Russians, they don't have, he's just always dismissing it. It's like, dude, we don't have one. Oh, yeah, but we're working on it. I mean, 2 years ago, he was saying, oh, yeah, it's going to be out in 2 months. Well, that was 2 years ago. I'm glad I didn't hold my breath. I'd be dead. Um, so the United States, um, well, the fact of the matter is, Russian ground forces, in terms of their army, is now roughly 3 times the size of our army, just the ground forces alone, and they've got half the number of people that we have population wise. Um, and yet we continue to think that we can beat anybody. Just like we sure whipped up on those Houthis, man. We showed them. Yeah, So here we get run out of the Red Sea by the Houthis. We can't hang in there; it's too risky for us. We keep playing. Oh man, we got the best. We're the biggest. We're the baddest. And yeah, as long as you're the big tough guy in a room full of people in wheelchairs, yeah, you can probably kick some crippled ass. That's for sure. But get in that room with people that are your own size, or maybe even a little bigger. Then what happens? All of a sudden, it's a new day. So I think part of the current hatred directed at Russia, I really think it's part of a, if you will, a spiritual battle, something that develops into the world of religion. Because the Russians really are, they are sincerely, they are what I call sincere believers that the Orthodox Christian faith is very important. And what really separates Orthodox Christianity from Catholicism, and I'm sure I'll tick off a bunch of Catholics with what I'm about to say, but the Catholic tradition is very much a hierarchical pyramid, and it's all about, if you will, control. And yet, in this control, it's been, the evil, if there's such a thing as evil, which I believe there is, and evil is spiritual forces, things that actually move and have effects in the world, but are not necessarily seen. The Catholic Church has been, a big target and has been a big vessel of evil in terms of the pedophilia, the crimes against children that have been. I mean, we're not talking one or two; we're talking tens of thousands of priests that have done this. But it's all, you got to conform or else. You work in the hierarchy. Orthodox Christianity doesn't have that. It's more like being in the Baptist church. There's not one supreme Baptist pastor. Even though some would say, "What about Billy Graham?" But they also, the priests are allowed to marry, and so you've got more, what I call, more normal sexual relationships. So when you're dealing with an Orthodox priest, and you said, "Hey, I'm having trouble with my marriage," in contrast with the Catholic dude who's never been married and maybe has a thing for guys, it's just, it's a different form of advice, and it's that religious aspect where they condemn homosexuality without condemning homosexuals, if that makes sense. They view it as a sin, but they view the practicing homosexual as still one of God's children. You're not someone not to be persecuted or punished. And it's sort of this old school morality that I think has got the West all freaked out. Because we're into our transgender. There's really no right and wrong anymore. So I think that's one factor that plays into the Western attitude towards Russia today, because I could understand it during the Soviet era and again, even there we lied and created a mythology about why the Soviets did what they did. If I'm threatening you every day, I call you up and say, "Rashid, I'm coming over to your house. I'm going to burn your house down. Rashid, I'm buying some guns. I'm going to shoot at you. I'm going to get some hand grenades. I'm going to throw them at you." and then you take steps to protect yourself. You hire security personnel. You build a security fence. Then we get to come back and say, see, he's aggressive. Look at him. He's causing this. So, and I just heard this yesterday. I was on a group a Zoom call, and this one person, very knowledgeable, very intelligent, but was spinning this whole nonsense about the threat posed by China. Because look at China, it's growing its military. It's all they're out to really do harm. And I said, excuse me, when was the last country that invaded by China? 1979. Yeah, that's right. And they went to war with Vietnam over the issue of Vietnam's attack on Cambodia.
Mhm.
So since then, China hasn't invaded anybody. But what they've heard repeatedly from us, China's an enemy. We got to stop China. China's trying to take over it's trying to control the waters around its country. What the hell was that all about? We're like, we can't let that happen. And so in response to our threats, China builds up military power. And then we turn around and say, see, they're aggressive.
Mhm.
I mean, that's just ridiculous. So, and I pointed out, go tell the Afghans and the Iraqis and the Syrians and the Libyans and the Serbians and the Somalis. Tell them about the aggressive military actions of China over the last 35 years. Oh, sorry, that it would be us. We're the ones out killing all these people from other countries. It's just, I see this. That goes back to what we talked about at the outset. This arrogance of America, its mindset.
Mhm.
We can't do what I'm sure when you were growing up, and if you were bothering any of your siblings, your mother would say to you, Rashid, leave it. Keep your hands to yourself.
Mhm.
We need a mother like that. I had one. You had one.
Yeah, Larry, with the little time we have left, could you elaborate on the military situation and this so-called 28-point program
Yeah.
for peace or whatever?
Well, the bottom. Why did this peace plan suddenly appear? Why was it now? This seemingly came out of the blue. Very, very simple. Ukraine is losing the war. The Russian military is moving along 8 axes of attack. And an axis of attack is a line of attack. And, so we're talking over 1,000-mile front. And they're moving down south, they're moving in the middle, and they're moving up north. And they're advancing. The last time, on a much smaller scale, but back in January of 2015, the militias of the Donbass, of Luhansk and Donetsk, had surrounded about 8,000 Ukrainian troops at a village called Debaltseve, and basically kicked their ass. And the Ukrainians were, really facing sort of a General Custer moment at Little Bighorn. Angela Merkel hopped on a plane, flew to Moscow, and begged Vladimir Putin, oh, man, we got to stop this. Let's come up with a negotiated agreement. And out of that, we got Minsk II. And Minsk II was an agreement between the political leaders of the Donbass with signing it with the government of Ukraine. And that later fell apart. But then we had Merkel and Francois Hollande, who at the time was the French president. They admitted, yeah, we did this just to buy time so Ukraine could rebuild its army and rearm, refit, and so they'd be ready to go again against the Russians, which is exactly what happened. So this new peace plan by Trump, supposedly, or I mean, by Trump's people, pops up out of nowhere, and basically it wants to impose a ceasefire, get the Russians to stop in place. Why? Because the Russians are rolling over the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians are in real trouble. And so the way the peace plan is couched initially, oh, it's so pro-Russian. No, it's not. In fact, Russia's got two primary, put everything else aside, two primary objectives. They've said it from the outset, from day one. Number one, they want to demilitarize Ukraine. When the special military operation started in February 2022, and I call it, I use the Russian term for that instead of a war, because they didn't mobilize. The Russians have well over 3 million reservists they could have called up, but they didn't. And so the Russian army at the time, in terms of ground forces, was about 550,000. And then when you add in Air Force and naval personnel, they got up to about 1.3 million. But when they went into Ukraine at the time, they only invaded with about 125 to maybe 190,000 soldiers, which sounds like a lot, but spread them out along 1,000 miles, that's nothing. Ukraine at the time had like 275,000 active duty ground forces. And I guess that even encompassed their version of the Navy and Air Force. But they had a 900,000 man reserve. So now supposedly under this peace plan, they're saying, oh, we want Ukraine to have an 800,000 man army. What the hell? Do you realize that if Ukraine had an 800,000 man army, it would be the largest army in NATO? Larger than Turkey. It would have more soldiers than France, England, and Germany combined. This is our peace plan? And you sit there looking, the Russians said, surely we don't look that stupid. Okay? Because back in March of 2022, in the talks in Istanbul, the Russians and Ukrainians had agreed, okay, Russia was saying, we'll let you keep the Donbass. Donetsk and Luhansk will remain part of Ukraine, but your army, you're only going to have 85,000. This, building up into the hundreds of thousands, that's going to stop, because we don't want to have a military threat on our border. And Ukraine initially agreed to that. So demilitarization, point number one. Russia's not backing off of that. They are going to insist that Ukraine demilitarize, and part of that demilitarize is they cut off relations with NATO. No more NATO, no more foreign military support. And they're winning on the ballot. They are in the process of demilitarizing Ukraine. So why are they going to agree to some deal where they're going to, we think it's a good idea to let Ukraine build triple the size of its army compared to what it was in 2022? Not going to happen. The second thing is what they call denazification, the elimination of a government that is predicated upon Nazi ideology and the fascist nationalism of Stefan Bandera. Mm-hmm. And they have new elections, but not to allow, this equivalent. We're not going to allow the Ku Klux Klan to have a political party. Ain't going to happen. You're banned. You don't get to participate. And Russia's insisting on that too. So those two things, the current government in Ukraine is not going to accept. So this whole peace plan business, it's just political theater. It's not going to turn into anything of substance, and the war is going to continue on the ground.
In closing, Larry, do you think that Trump realizes that this has become his war, and that the outcome will weigh heavy on his presidency?
No and yes. So no, he refuses to accept the fact that this is his war. I mean, he could have cut it off on day one, stop the money, pull the CIA out, stop it. He didn't do that. But his claims that, man, I'll stop this war in 24 hours. Well, that was a stupid thing to say. And he might have been able to actually stop it in 24 hours, but he would have enraged the neoconservatives, the Lindsey Graham crowd. And so, Trump's not driving. He's not driving this train, man. He's a passenger. They put him. I don't know if you did this with your kids when they're young. Put them in a car and they get this little like child seat, but it's got an imaginary steering wheel.
Mm-hmm.
That's Trump. He's in the kiddie's chair, and they make him think that he's driving the train or steering the car.
Similar to Zelensky, because I keep hearing, and we'll close out on this, because I keep hearing them saying Zelensky doesn't want to negotiate, but doesn't Washington pull all the strings?
Yeah, well, no, not so much Washington. I think it really is this group of oligarchs, very, very, very wealthy, bad people in Ukraine that are calling the shots. Zelensky's he's the world's highest paid actor right now. That's all he is.
Larry, again, thank you, man, for coming onto the platform. I really appreciate you fitting the show in from time to time, man. I really do. Well,
I always appreciate and welcome the invitation, and I've been a bad guest in the past. I've showed up late, and so I got here early today, guys. I got to show some respect to Brother Rashid, huh?
Larry, thank you so much, man. I'll send you the video in about 5 minutes, man. Be safe and be blessed. And
hey,
thank you.
You have a happy Thanksgiving with your family too.
You too. And I'll talk to you later, man.
All right.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Everybody, listen, as I often say, I hope you got something out of this, okay? Do right by others, not because there's some material gain in it or because there's some accolades or because of some praise or whatever. Do right by others because it's the humane and the godly thing to do, because even when no one else is watching you, God Almighty is watching you. Before I go off there, I have to say this. Shout out to M Sparks for the donation. I don't know what happened. YouTube must have wiped it off the screen. I've been searching so that I can post it, but thank you for the super chat. Now, as my mother would always say, my great, beautiful, magnificent late mother would say, God sits high on the throne of power, but he looks low. Know that I love each and every one of you who loves truth, but know that the love that I have for you will always pale in comparison to the love that the true and living God has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, remember to stay righteous, because righteousness is the only thing that's going to get you out of here. Hey, mama, your baby boy loves you more than life. Thank you, everybody. I love you all. Salute and peace. We're out of here.
Told you to walk away. That was my first and last mistake. I'm blue without your face. But what can I do? 'Cause I'm just a